मैं अब फॉर्मली स्टार्ट करने लगा हूं, तो काइंडली जिन लोगों ने रजिस्ट्रेशन कराई है वो अपने वेब कैम्स ऑन कर लें। और डॉक्टर साहिबा, आई एम नाउ रेडी, आर यू देयर?
Yes, I'm here.
तो आपने अपना कैम ओपन करना है,
It's on. Yes.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious and the most merciful. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. From the Pakistan Society of Civil Engineers, Lahore, we extend a warm welcome to all participants, including those joining us on Facebook. Today marks lecture number 72 in our monthly series, which has been running continuously since 2020. Through these sessions, PSCE strives to provide both emerging and seasoned engineers with the latest insights across diverse civil engineering disciplines. We encourage all participants to support our mission to make PSCE an increasingly vibrant and impactful society dedicated to the dissemination of knowledge. Now, before I start introducing the speaker and introduce the topic, it's incumbent on me to read out the rules of the webinar as per instructions given by Pakistan Society of Pakistan Engineering Council. Registered participants for CPD points have to appear live on webcam. However, for the ladies, there is an exception. If they wish, they can cover their face while appearing live on webcam. During the lecture, microphone of all the participants except that of the speaker shall remain in mute positions. There will be a question answer session of 20 minutes at the end of the lecture. At that time, you can ask the questions through the chat box where you can type your question and I will read the questions and Dr. Saiba will answer your questions. I would also recommend that during the lecture, you can type in your questions wherever I will see it is pertinent to ask the question. I will interrupt Dr. Saiba and inshallah, she will answer your questions. On Facebook, same rules apply regarding the question answer session. Now, today's topic is impacts of transportation on climate change. And our guest speaker is Dr. Izza Anwar. Dr. Izza Anwar is a distinguished expert in transportation engineering with a strong background in both academia and industry. She completed her BSc and MSc in transportation engineering from UET Lahore in 2006 and 2009 respectively. She earned her doctorate degree from University of Leeds, UK in 2018. With over 18 years of experience, Dr. Anwar has developed a robust portfolio of teaching, research, and international collaborations, specializing in transportation, planning, management, and sustainable transport solutions. She has authored several high-impact peer-reviewed publications, contributed to book chapters, and presented at prestigious international conferences. Dr. Anwar has also been instrumental in designing advanced curricula for certificate, undergraduate, and postgraduate programs in transportation engineering. In her roles as elected member of various academic and professional bodies, including the Senate, Syndicate, and Pakistan Engineering Council's Women Engineers Committee, she actively contributes to policy and advisory initiatives. Her expertise extends to smart mobility, smart technologies, climate resilience, and sustainable transport systems, with a focus on building resilient communities in response to climate change and disruptive events. So this was a very short and a brief introduction of Dr. Saiba. Dr. Anwar, The floor is yours. Please start your lectures.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And particularly to Professor Zia. The topic, the talk of today is impacts of transportation on climate change. Before I make you through the contents of the presentation, let me tell you that it is actually a very, very broad topic. And this topic is still evolving every day because we are looking at climate from different perspectives. And each day we are coming across the different aspect of climate, and our transportation system is also evolving every day. So this is a very dynamic kind of topic. The contents, first I will tell you about the introduction, a common introduction and the objective of our today's talk. Then I'll tell you what is climate change, its basic concepts, basic terminologies, greenhouse gases and carbon cycle, climate change and transportation. Then I will tell you about the coping strategies and the variables that are involved in it. Then I'll show you two examples, one from USA and the other from Europe. And then I'll tell you about the key indicators following the evaluation strategies. And finally, we will conclude the study. The main objective of this talk today is that I'll tell you about the concepts, and I have covered this topic in a breadth wise. The breadths of the climate change and its relation to the transportation. So in the end, I will also tell you how to approach to evaluate the climatic impacts, particularly related to transportation systems. And along with this whole talk, there might be a couple of places where I will refer you to my own studies, in which I have worked on the disasters and its impacts on the transportation. So here is my Google link, Google Scholar profile link. You can go to this link and you can check out my papers that I have published. So even after the presentation, at any moment you feel like that you need further information on a specific topic or on a specific aspect, you can contact me later as well. So I'll start with the climate change. And I know that it's a very known term right now, climate change, and everyone is talking about climate impacts and the challenges that this climate is posing upon all of us. But we don't know that where are the key aspects lie, to which if we address, then we can lower the impact of climate change. Or even if we can't lower, we can at least control the impacts of climate change. So according to United Nations, climate change means the change of climate, which is attributed either directly or indirectly to the human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere, and which is in addition to natural climate variability that is observed over a comparable period of time. Then you might come across different terminologies that we usually attach with the climate change. So in the next two slides, these terminologies that you might have heard are explained under the definition of posed by United Nations. The adverse effects of climate change are actually the physical and environmental impacts that are posing on the flora and fauna of the earth, and it is depleting many resources, and it is creating an imbalance between the natural resilience of our system. It is also impacting the socio-economic aspects of our planet as well. So weather and climate, these are two different things, and we usually mix both of these together. So it is very important to understand the difference between weather and climate, because when we have to check the very minute impact of climate, we should understand that what is the difference between weather and climate, and the data that we gather for the weather how it is going to give us a bigger picture of climate and the data that we are going to manage for the climate to check its impacts from where that data is coming. So weather is the atmospheric state at a specific time and place. For example, it may be data regarding one day, 1 hour, 1 week, 1 month, but it is not spanning over a huge period of time. And most weather phenomena that occur in the atmosphere's lower layer that directly affects the people, agriculture, and the ecosystem. Key weather elements include temperature, precipitation, clouds, and wind that is experienced either on daily basis or in weekly basis, monthly basis, etc. Severe weather conditions, they include hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, and droughts. In climate, it is actually the long-term average of the weather in a specific area. So unlike weather, which changes within minutes or hours, climate shifts occur over a decade to centuries. And even after like a couple of centuries, you can say that the climate has changed on a slower pace or a faster pace. So you should have a lots of data to justify the changes or dynamic shifts in the climate. Climate is characterized by average temperatures, precipitations, as well as the types, frequency, duration, intensity of the events like heat waves, cold spells, storms, floods, etc., that you might be hearing in these days, at least from the couple of decades, from the past 10 decades. Climate system, you might have heard this term. Actually, all the climate events, they are, when they are coming together, they make a whole climate system. That means totality of the atmosphere, hydrosphere, biosphere, and geosphere, and their interactions. It means that if I simplify it for you, what is happening on the solid ground, what is happening underwater, all the water bodies on our planet, let's say cloud, let's say rivers, lakes, everywhere. And then the life, the living life, organisms, human beings, animals, all the all the living beings that are either in the water or on the mountains or everywhere. So that is covering the bigger biosphere of our planet. And then it also involves the geosphere, like whatever the changes that is coming in our on our earth, the solid parts and the tectonic plates and all that kind of shifts. So it covers all the aspects, physical aspects that are happening on our planet. It is related to the, it is a part of the climate system. So any imbalance between any of them will create a climatic shift. Emissions means release of greenhouse gases and or their precursors into the atmosphere over a specified area or a specified time. Now, let me clarify you guys here that emissions are not only coming from the transports, for example, not only coming from the vehicles, but from the vehicles is a very small scale. The emissions are coming from all the industry, from our residential area, from our commercial area, for all the energy resources that we are using, and for all the resources that we are depleting on the planet Earth. Greenhouse gases are actually very important to understand. And you might have heard this term when you were doing like your FSC, metric, etc. But the concept of greenhouse gases is way deeper than it sounds to us. It means that those gaseous constituents of the atmosphere, both natural and anthropogenic, that absorb or re-emit infrared radiation. So it is not only capturing the heat, but it is also capturing the infrared radiations, and that is causing lots of diseases and negative impacts of many, many different types. We are going to study the detail in incoming slides. Then you might have heard the term reservoir, which means those components of the climate system where greenhouse gases or its precursor of a greenhouse gas is stored, like all those things that are storing carbon dioxide or heat is known as a reservoir. Then you might have heard the sink, and sink means any process or activity or any mechanism which removes greenhouse gases an aerosol or a precursor of a greenhouse gas from the atmosphere. So it means that sink is playing a positive impact to uh, extract heat from the reservoir and send it back to the outer atmosphere. So it is trying to keep a balance. Then source, it means any process or activity which releases a greenhouse gas, an aerosol, or a precursor of a greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. So a source is actually the medium, whether it is water, whether it is gas, or whether it is some other any other medium. Antonio, he is UN's Secretary General. He's saying that climate change is the defining issue of our time. So if you see previous centuries, or if you study history by some means, then you see that every nation or civilization, they face a challenge. So the challenge that is posed to our nation, our civilization, is actually the climate change. Every day we fail to act in a day that we step a little closer towards the fate that none of us wants, a fate that will resonate through the generations in the damage done to humankind and life on it. So from his statement, you can assume that this is not a small thing, and the impacts and the effects of this climate change will go to the next generations as it is passed on to us from our previous generations. So if I show you all around the world, uh, China, United States, India, Europe, and Russia, these are the top five countries that are contributing 60% of greenhouse gases towards the climate change. And these figures are from the 2021. So these five emitters are in the top priority, who are major contributors towards climate change. Following to that, 76% of the global greenhouse gases emissions are done by these groups, in which if you focus, I would particularly ask you to focus that China is in both, is in the top five and in the group of 20 as well, who are contributing up to 76% of the global greenhouse gases. And the next name is China, India, and Russia. So if you observe, these countries are in our neighborhood from the Pakistani point of view. They are our neighbors. So uh, we are holding the burden of climate change from these bigger economies as well. So we may not be producing that much of climatic impact, but we are also getting negative climatic impact from these economies. By contrast, least developed countries, by the way, we are the least developed countries that account for about 3.8% of global emissions, while small islands and developing states, they contribute less than 1%. So why we bother? Why we have to bother the climate? We have to bother the climate because it is actually declared as a climate emergency now. And it is the biggest threat to our planet that affects the economy, society, and environment. And it is bringing a biggest paradigm shift in around the world. Climate-related disasters have nearly doubled in the past 20 years. Inequalities have worsened, and if you see that inequalities is not just a one term that is applicable in a single constant. There are lots of inequalities of different natures, and they are spreading across different countries, and especially those countries who have lesser resources, like our country. They are also holding the burden of the economies. Those are strong in terms of economy and other aspects. Climate change threatens the achievement of 2030 sustainable development goals that are posed by the USA, and including the disaster risk reduction. So we cannot achieve our sustainable development goals by 2030 if climate keeps on deteriorating. It is reshaping the global resources like water, land, energy, while driving the migration and instability to the whole system. Achieving a sustainable net zero carbon world requires rapid changes in the sector like food sector, energy sector, and health sector, because they are contributing a lot towards the impact towards the climatic impact, and climate is also in reverse affecting energy, food, and health systems. Collective action, political leadership, and funding are necessary to limit the temperature rise up to 1.5 Celsius. So I will show you in the coming slides that world have come to a point where they only agrees to raise like limit the climatic impacts, and the temperature can rise up to 1.5 below than 2 Celsius. So it is still agreeable and manageable. But if the temperature rise is more than that, then we are going towards the, I would say, catastrophe. Prudent risk management involves preparing of various degrees of warming and addressing concurrent crises like COVID-19. So a greenhouse gas is the major contributing. But how it is majorly contributing? A greenhouse gas is any gas that can absorb infrared radiations, heat energy, and emit it from the Earth's surface and then radiate it back, amplify the greenhouse effect. So it means that the heat is not going outside of our atmosphere, but it is coming back and back to our atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapors. These are the key players that are more significant greenhouse gases, with surface level ozone, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases also contribute, though maybe a lesser degree. Despite being only small fraction of all the atmospheric gases, greenhouse gases strongly influence Earth's energy balance. So it is disbalancing the Earth's energy. Their concentration have fluctuated considerably through Earth's history, driving substantial climatic changes over various time scales. Typically, greenhouse gas levels have been higher in warm periods and lower during the cooler periods. So, if you can see, basically, Earth's atmosphere should act like this, that all the infrared rays that are coming from the sun should be reflected back. But as due to these greenhouse gases, the balance is disturbed. These infrared rays, lots of absorption of the heat is happening due to increased level of carbon dioxide. And all of this infrared and carbon dioxide, they are playing a very negative impact on our daily basis. For example, daily health situation, skin diseases, high temperatures. We used to call our Earth as like this phenomena as global warming, but it's not global warming anymore. It's global boiling. Uh, Now it is termed as global boiling points. Different greenhouse gases can range from a couple of days, couple of years to thousands of years. So naturally, it takes lots of time to reverse this climatic change. In addition, some gases are more effective than others at making the planet warmer. Learn more about global warming potentials, a measure of climate impacts that is based on how long each greenhouse gas remains in the atmosphere and how strongly it absorbs the energy. Okay, if I ask you to dig down greenhouse gas, then you need to learn the phenomena of carbon cycle. So carbon cycle is the continuous movement of carbon between the atmosphere and the earth. On earth, carbon is stored in rocks, sediments, ocean, and living organisms. So if it is stored in all of these things, then it means that all of these different physical entities are storing heat. They are not reflecting it back. And they are also storing infrared rays. Carbon is returned to the atmosphere when plants and animals decompose, fire burns, volcanic eruptions are happening, fossil fuels are burning, then lots of carbon is generated. This cycle helps maintain a balance of carbon across Earth's reservoirs. However, a change in the carbon amount in one reservoir impacts all other reservoirs. So today, Human activities disrupt the carbon cycle by burning fossil fuels, and we are burning lots of fossil fuels. If I ask you an example, then you should say that in our vehicles we are burning fossil fuels, we are burning coal in our factories, in our commercial areas, in our houses, we are burning gases, methane gas, and all that kind of stuff. So we are burning fossil fuels at a higher pace. That's why this imbalance has happened, which releases large amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and by altering land use, which reduces plant life and absorb more and more atmospheric carbon. Methane is also playing a major role. It is emitted from both natural as well as human activities. So major sources include natural wetlands, agriculture, and fossil fuel extraction and transport. Other than that, nitrous oxide, which primarily be produced by agricultural activities and natural biological processes, for example, body decays, also generated by fossil fuel combustion and industrial processes. Then there are F gases, fluoride-based gases, that includes chlorofluorocarbons, fluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluorocarbons, etc. Commonly used in coolants, foaming agents, fire extinguishers, solvents, pesticides, and aerosol propellants. So they are also used in high quantities. Ground level ozone forms through a chemical reaction that involves nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds. This reaction occurs in sunlight with sources including emissions from vehicles, power plants, and other industrial and commercial activities. And besides trapping heat, ground level ozone is a pollutant that can cause respiratory health issues, and it also harms crops and ecosystems, and they are also damaging the skins and causing lots of skin diseases. Water vapors is a greenhouse gas that significantly influence climate feedback due to its heat trapping properties. And warmer the air gets, the more warmer air can hold more moisture compared to the cooler air. As greenhouse gas levels and global temperatures rise, the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere also rise. And if the water vapors are increasing, then they are storing more and more heat. So you can observe this phenomena in your May, June, July, August, September, particularly in those timings when there is lots of humidity. This increase in water vapor further intensifies the warming effect that creates a feedback loop. Aerosols, you are observing a smoke. If you are from Lahore, you are observing smoke these days. So aerosols are actually playing a major part in that. They can influence climate significantly. Aerosols are tiny solid or liquid particles that stay suspended because their weight is very light, and they are not that dense, so they can settle. So that stays suspended in the air for days to weeks instead of quickly settling. Human activities like burning of fossil fuels, biomass, release of aerosol through natural resources such as volcanoes and marine planktons, and also they also produce them. And human activities are making this phenomena even worse. Unlike greenhouse gases, aerosol climate effects vary based on their composition and emission locations. Aerosols can either absorb or reflect sunlight depending on their color and properties. So if they are denser and darker in color, they are storing more and more heat, more and more sunlight. Reflective aerosols, such as those from volcanic eruptions or sulfur emissions from coal burning, have cooling effect on the climate. Absorbative aerosols like black carbon, which is a component of soot, that is actually a contributor to smoke, contribute to warming by absorbing sunlight. Not only can black carbon directly absorb incoming and reflected sunlight, but it can also absorb infrared light radiations. Black carbon can also be deposited on the slopes, on the snow, ice, on buildings, darkening the surfaces and thereby increase the snow's absorption of sunlight, and that accelerates melting. You might have heard the phenomena of melting of glaciers. So this is what happening there. While reductions in all aerosols can lead to more warming, targeted reductions in black carbon can reduce global warming. So, warming and cooling aerosols can also interact with clouds. So, changing the ability to form and dissipate, as well as their reflectivity and precipitation rates, they changes as well. So, clouds can contribute both to cooling by reflecting the sunlight and warming by trapping the outgoing heat. Climate speaks. So if we keep on pushing something, ultimately there comes a time when it starts answering to us. So we have pushed our climate a lot. Now it is speaking to us, and these are not the good words that they are saying to us. Climate feedbacks are natural processes that either offset or amplify changes in the climate system due to global warming. So if you hear somewhere that negative feedbacks, then it means that these are those impacts that are not directly observable, but it is happening somewhere else. So you can call it offset changes in the climate. But if you can observe the climatic changes visually, or you can feel it, you can sense it, then you can call them positive feedbacks. And that is actually the amplify effect of climate changes. Positive feedbacks involve water vapors, which is the most significant positive feedback. Higher temperature increases evaporations and water vapor in the atmosphere. As a greenhouse gas, water vapor contributes to the further warming. Arctic sea ice melting. It is another very positive feedback that you can observe, and you are observing it. If you check the stats, you can also get their year-wise or month-wise changes. Rising temperatures lead to ice retreat, exposing darker sea surfaces. Darker surfaces absorb more sunlight, and that leads to the additional warming. Then reduced snow cover. You can also observe it, and lots of data is available on snow cover. Similar to sea ice, reduced snow cover in warm winters express darker lands, leading to further warming. Clouds and climatic feedback. These clouds influence climate with both warming and cooling impacts. So in cooling effect, clouds reflect sunlight, especially during the daytime. Warming effect, clouds slow down heat loss to the space, and especially noticeable on cloudy nights. Changes in clouds with the climate change affects cloud coverage, altitude, and reflectivity that results in either positive or negative feedback. Likely net effect is positive due to increased altitude of high clouds in the tropics, enhancing heat trapping, and reduced lower level cloud coverage in mid latitude, lowering the sunlight reflection. Magnitude of any feedback remains uncertain due to complexity of cloud climate interaction. So this is a new area of research if you want to explore it further. This is a very complex phenomena, and it involves lots of variables in it, and lots of techniques are yet to be developed to understand that what is happening in that dynamics of cloud and climate. If we consider weather and climate as our examples, like it is one of the indicator that yes, the climate change is happening, and you can also estimate the pace that climate change is happening, and its pace is whether slower or higher to some relevant figures. Increasing global average temperature are linked to broad shifts in the weather pattern. Scientific research suggests that extreme weather events such as heat waves, severe storms are likely to occur more frequently or with more intensity due to human driven climate change. Another aspect you might have heard nowadays is that there is a school of thought that is saying that there are no natural disasters, but all the disasters are human driven disasters. So, likewise, climate changes are human driven. This is a school of thought. They are saying that because humans are disturbing the atmosphere, disturbing the climate, That's why these changes are happening, and this is in response to this, disasters are occurring. Their occurrence has increased, and it's not the nature that is posing disasters on us. It's actually the human in the background. Long-term climate changes can directly or indirectly disrupt various aspects of society. Warmer average temperatures may lead to higher air conditioning cost and influence the spread of diseases like Lyme disease. We have heard it, like in started hearing about it in the previous years. Yet they might also benefit certain crop growing conditions. More frequent and intense weather extremes pose significant risk to our society. Intense heat events increase risk of illness, mortality, particularly for vulnerable groups, and can harm certain crops. So, if you observe the built environment of Europe and UK, etc., they have built their buildings considering in mind that they will have a sustained weather towards the cold, not the hot. So, but when the temperature is rising around 20 Celsius there, they start calling it as a heat wave. So, in the recent decade, they are also feeling the heat wave, even though that temperature is normal to many countries. So, there are shifts in different countries, different kind of shifts are observed, different kind of climatic or disastrous conditions are observed. So climate change is not same change all across the world, but every country is facing a different aspect of climate change. And also the response or disaster response or feedback, or as I said, the disaster is speaking. So it is the climate is speaking. So climate is posing different challenges to different countries. This is also because each country is a different contributor. Some countries are contributing through their industry, some are through their residential activities, some are through their commercial activities, some are through transport, etc. Increased precipitation can replenish water sources and benefit agriculture, but severe storms may damage property, cause fatalities, displace population, and temporarily disrupt critical services like transportation, telecommunications, energy, and water supplies. As I told you in the beginning of this session, that I have a couple of papers written on the transportation and telecommunication and how disasters are affecting them. You can go on Google profile and uh, check these papers for further information. Here I'm going to pose an example from the US transportation system. So, how US is checking that how climate is impacted. So they have categorized these three bigger things based on which they are checking the impact of climate on this and its impact on the climate. As I told you in the beginning, that it is not the effect of transportation on the climate, but climate have also its impact on the transportation. For example, infrastructure is destroyed due to the results of negative impacts of the climate. And these also infrastructure, for example, airport, train stations, road, bridges, pipelines, bike trails, etc. All of these are impacting on the climate as well. So it's a two-way thing. It's not just a one-way thing. We are also in our mind, we are imagining that transportation is impacting climate. There are many other aspects that are impacting climate, and climate in reverse are started impacting on these other things as well. Vehicles, including cars, buses, trucks, trains, ships, and aircrafts, and then the people, including their equipment operators, designers, builders, transportation officials. They are doing such kind of activities that are impacting climate, and climate is also impacting them. Here are a couple of facts and figures that will show you that how USA has changed over the time, how USA is facing climatic impacts. And the example of USA, I have used USA here. That there are two reasons behind this. First, USA is a very big, it's a very big country, and it covers almost all kind of different weather conditions that we can assume in Asia, Europe, and other continents. US have lots of resources compared to other economies. right? So how they are dealing with the situation, and they have advanced technology as well. How they are dealing with the situation with all those big resources, how they are impacted by climate, and you can compare it with other countries as well. So average temperatures across the contiguous US have risen since 1901. They have started observing it from there with accelerated warming since the late 1970s. So if you see that industrial revolution and all that kind of stuff, that is in between 1950s to 19 towards 1980s and then so on. 9 of 10 warmest years recorded have occurred since 1998, and globally, from 2014 to 2023 was the warmest decade on record. And let's see if it is getting more warmer in the next 10 years. Within the USA, temperatures have increased the most in part of Northwest and Alaska. Seasonal temperatures have lots of variations as well. Warming affects all season, but temperature increases vary by season. Since 1896, average winter temperature across the US have risen about 3 Fahrenheit. Spring temperatures have increased roughly about 2 Fahrenheit, while summer and so even if 1 degree rise in temperature can cause a huge sea level rise. So you can imagine that why lots of hurricanes, cyclones, floods are coming in those countries and in Europe and other countries as well. High and low temperatures, extreme temperature events are becoming more common all around the world, globally. Since 1970s, usually hot summer days, high, and summer nights have lower temperature have become increasingly frequent. Cold winter temperatures, especially very cold nights, have become less common. Record daily high temperatures now outnumber record lows. Heat waves are occurring more frequently in US cities, now averaging 6 per year compared to 2 year per in 1960s. So they have collected data from 1960s, 50s onwards, and they are comparing it from the data from the past 10 years. So they are observing that there are huge changes, significant changes and frequent changes in the past 10 years compared to previous century. The heat wave season has extended by 46 days, and individual events are lasting longer and increasing in the intensity. Global precipitation and USA precipitation. Annual precipitation has increased over land areas in US and worldwide. Since 1901, precipitation over the US has risen by 0.18 inches per decade. Some areas like Southwest has experienced decreased precipitation due to a shifting of weather pattern. Heavy precipitation. A greater share of US precipitation now comes from intense single day events. It's not like spanning over a week or 1 day or 2 day, it is raining heavily there. Extreme 1 day precipitation events held steady from 1910 to 1980s but have risen since then, and it is increasing with every decade now. 9 of the 10 years with the most extreme 1 day precipitation events have occurred since 1995. Tropical cyclone activity has also increased over the past 30 years. Tropical storm activity has increased in Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf of Mexico. Storm intensity has risen in correlation with sea surface temperature in the tropical Atlantic. Records since the late 1800s do not show an increase in the actual number of hurricanes per year. River flooding, uh, river flood frequency and severity vary by region. Larger floods are more common in parts of the northern and Midwest, while the West, Southern Appalachia, and northern Michigan see fewer large floods. The Northeast, Pacific Northwest, and northern Great Plains have experienced more frequent large floods, while the Southwest and Rockies have seen a decrease. Drought conditions in the USA have varied over time. The most extensive droughts occurred in 1930s, 50s, while the last 50 years have been generally wetter. Regional trends show increased drought in the west and wetter conditions in the Midwest and Northeast. From 2000 to 2023, 10 to 70% of USA land was abnormally dry at any given time, though this data does not extend far enough back for the historical comparison. A closer look to the temperature and drought in the Southwest shows that highly sensitive to temperature increases, making it vulnerable to drought. Even slight decreases in water availability in this arid region strains natural systems and further threatens water supplies. Indicators point to persistent and more severe drought conditions in the recent years. So you can see that lots of disasters due to the climatic change has occurred in USA. And if you see the situation in Pakistan, we have drought here as well. Lots of floods in the past decade, and lots of landslides and other aspects that are affecting, that is disturbing our biodiversity here now. Transportation's role in climate change. Uh, the transportation sector also emits greenhouse gases into the atmosphere that contribute to the climate change. So at this point, you are very well aware that how greenhouse gases are impacting our atmosphere and how it is contributing towards climate change. But it is not just the transportation that is impacting climate. Climate is disrupting transportation systems as well. Climate change can disrupt transportation networks. It stresses our infrastructure and it poses safety risk to the people. I have also a couple of publications on that. So if you want to check the details, you can see there as well. Climate impacts on transportation is in, you have to consider three things. First, impacts on the system safety and its functioning. If it is functioning properly or not, or if it is disrupted. Systems cost and economy, because when a system is disrupted, infrastructure is broken, communication system is broken, then ultimately there would be lots of economic loss, life loss, property damages, and that is also impacting the overall economy. Reduced access to the social services and necessities, whether it's the climatic impact on the transportation or transportation's impact on the climate, we human beings are in loss because we will get reduced access to our social services. For example, road transportation infrastructure, we can't move in a proper way, and it will also directly or indirectly impact health and well-being, economy, and other aspects. Now I'm going to show you the example of Europe, how Europe is dealing with it. Europe aims to achieve 90% of reduction in greenhouse gas emission from the transport sector only by 2050. And compared to their previous policies that they made in 1990, in previous policies, the aim was to reduce the greenhouse gas emission from industrial perspective, but now it has shifted to transportation perspective. This is part of its effort to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and achieve climate neutrality by 2050. There are lots of documents related to European reports, Green Deal roadmap, etc. So you can, for the reference, you can go and check there for further details. In Europe, transport was responsible for about a quarter of Europe's total carbon dioxide emissions in 2019, of which 71.7% came from road transport, according to a report. Transport is the only sector where greenhouse gas emissions have increased in the past 3 decades, and it is rising 33.5% between 1990 and 2019, with significantly reducing carbon dioxide emissions from transport will not be easy. It's a bigger challenge for them as well. As the rate of emission reduction has slowed down, current projections put the decrease in transport emissions by 2050 at only 22%. They were expecting it 50% more percentage, but they can only hardly do it up to 22%, far behind the current ambition. It is describing you that road transport, in which private cars, heavy trucks, light duty trucks, and motorcycles, they are contributing 72, approximately 72% of transport emissions. And other than that, railways, other modes of transport, civil aviation, water navigation, etc., they are they are lesser contributor in terms of transport sectors. Greenhouse gas emissions and sinks in each economic sector. So we can't just focus on the transportation, but lots of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from electricity production, industry, commercial and residential activities, agriculture, land use, and forestry as well. So if you see this graph, this is actually a very big graph showing multiple aspects. But here I have picked up a portion of that graph, in which you can see that until 2019, domestic transport is still contributing emissions, lots of emissions, and it has become a challenge. And in domestic transport, they mean lots of private cars. And if for some moment I will ask you to just imagine, Europe have a very efficient public transport system, which is an alternative to private cars, and that is effectively reducing or controlling carbon dioxide emissions. But just compare it to our scenario, in Pakistani scenario, we have lots of cars, we have lesser roads and lots of cars. So you can check how much carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases we are contributing to the system, to the climate. And even then, as I told you in the starting slides, just imagine India and China next to us, how much they are contributing with just with the transport sector, not only from other industry sector, because both of the countries are like they have a very strong industry as well. They are very good in power generation as well. They are very good in agriculture as well, but just focus on the transport systems of that. Other than domestic transport, they have tried to control emissions from residential and commercial activities, energy supply, industry, and agriculture. But transport is yet a challenge to them. Why is there a need to act? Like, after all this discussion, I would ask you that why we need to act? What justifies us? So scientists, researchers, and communities, like all the stakeholders across the globe, are recording changes that exceed the natural temperature fluctuations on land and in the oceans. So you can see, as our temperatures are fluctuating, you can check the seasons all around the year. The season, and these seasons are impacting our agricultural lands. These seasons are impacting the health aspect, on different other aspects as well. So this is one of the reasons that we have to start acting now, because whether we are getting floods or we are getting droughts, water as a resource, as a reservoir, we are losing sources of water. So the land that was a desert before is going to turn into ocean. Those oceans are going to turn into deserts. So whole biodiversity of the globe is going to get disturbed. So if it's not a one country's thing, it's not a very specific thing, it's a global phenomena. So all have to think about it and act in one direction. That's why we need to think about it and we need to act in that direction. They also observe unusual shifts in seasonal patterns, in rainfalls, other environmental systems. And when I see environmental system, it is the biodiversity and all other environmental system, from ozone layer to the environmental system under the water, on the mountains, in the forest, etc. There is strong scientific consensus on climate change. These abnormal changes are consequences of global warming. I would say global boiling now, driven by an intensified greenhouse effect due to large-scale greenhouse gas emissions from human activities. Now, what happened when the world realized that, okay, we have done this damage? This damage is occurring day by day and its pace is increasing. So when world realized, what did they do? An international climate regime has emerged in response to the climate crisis. And as I told you earlier, it is now a climate emergency now. It's not a small thing. And the word emergency we use when we have no other option, we have small time and lots of big losses are going to happen. And irreversible losses are going to happen. That's why we are saying it climate crisis, climate emergency. Governments, intergovernmental organizations, and non-governmental organizations are collaborating. And if I show you the example of America along with Europe, business, research institutions, and civil society is also involved in many countries. Still, not all of the countries, but the leaders. These groups are working together to build scientific knowledge, and their efforts aim to address the causes and threats of climate change. The concentration of greenhouse gases has been rising steadily since the time of industrial revolution. As a result of human activity, primarily the burning of fossil fuels and changes in land use, leading to increasing global temperatures. The average global temperature on Earth is directly linked to the concentration of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. Small rises in temperature have major impacts on weather and climate system, causing detrimental impacts on the life and society. Urgent action is needed. Urgent action is needed to mitigate additional emissions, reduce the greenhouse gases concentration in the atmosphere, and to adapt to the current and future impacts of the climate. So this is the sustainable development goals that we have to achieve in future. This is this colorful picture is a document on which all the countries around the world uh, have us to move in a unique direction, in one direction, right? So this document is engaging each country around the globe, and the targets are common. The goal is common. The indexes are common. So now the world know that we have to move in this direction, and these 17 goals are to reduce our greenhouse gases, to reduce the impact of climate. Here at number 13, you can see that there is a separate sustainable development goal whose sole purpose is to take a climate action to reduce the climatic impacts. But this 13 is linked with all of the other 16 sustainable development goals because it is impacting our biodiversity, it is impacting on the climates, it is impacting what is below the water, it is impacting what is on the ground, it is impacting what is in the air. So everything is impacted by this 13 sustainable development goal, climate action, and in reverse. This climate action is impacting all of them. All of them are impacting climate action, right? So this is the key point that all countries have to realize and they have to act accordingly. And
We are having, I think, a technical problem here at the speaker's end. So I think she has got disconnected already. We'll check. Yeah, my staff has contacted the speaker. Inshallah, I
जी
think.
वापस वही तुम्हारी मेरी बात है मैंने
I
10
think
साल
inshallah
फिर भी डिस्कस किया
2 minutes.
लेकिन तुम्हें इतना तो आइडिया है कि कौन ये शरारत तुम्हारे साथ किसी की की जब क्लिश
Yeah, Dr. Anwar is going to join us. I think she is already in.
My sincere
Ji, Dr. Saiba, welcome back. You can resume your lecture.
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can see the screen already.
Yeah, screen is visible now. The shared screen is
Right.
visible, and you are also, we can hear
Yeah,
you
thank you.
well. So go ahead.
Thank you. Apologies for that, guys. What are, yes, I'm starting now.
Ji, Dr.
Okay,
Saiba, can you
so
hear me?
world is
I
moving
have
towards the smart city concept, and in smart
Dr.
city,
Saiba, can you hear
we
me?
have actually we are
Dr.
actually
Anwar, can I
looking
interrupt
at
you?
the smart city to take measures that have lower impact on the climate from all aspects. And sorry,
Dr. Anwar, can I interrupt you? There was a question. Uh,
yes, please.
so the question is in the chat box, and it has come from Nabil Ahmed. He is asking what indicators are commonly used to define and measure climate change in the transportation sector? Temperature, precipitation, sea levels. And he's
It's
further asking
yeah, it is coming. Hmm.
what is the significance of baselines in defining climate change, and how are these baselines chosen?
Yeah, can you just wait for a couple of slides? I'm giving you a bigger picture of all the indicators, all the possible
Okay, okay.
indicators
Do
that
go
are
ahead,
involved.
please.
And
It's okay.
yeah, yeah. What are the needs of developing a smart city? So we have developed the concept of smart city, particularly from the transportation point of views. So if you look at this bigger picture, you can see that uh, we have introduction of electric vehicle infrastructure, smart houses which are generating less gases and saving more energy. They are energy efficient. The materials are used in such a way that they are not holding on to heat, but they are reflecting the heat and keeping the environment cool. Again, we have lots of good measures taken for emergency and disaster response. Alternative energy sources are used other than the other than fossil fuel based sources. For example, we are using solar panels, windmills, etc. Then public safety is one of the critical aspects that have been covered all in all other aspects. Then in the smart cities, the more focus is on multimodal intelligent transport systems rather than individual cars and individual trips. And there are also introduction of many services such as carpooling. I'll show you in the coming slides that how it is, how we are going to do that. Then e-services, less paper, more trees, electronic waste. And we are also dealing with the heats and energies that are produced by our electronic devices. So uh, this smart city is environment friendly, the building design is good, and everything is like in such a way that it will definitely reduce the carbon emissions. So better civilizations, advanced civilizations, they are moving towards this smart city model. So how developed world switched towards smart cities, and how they thought that they have to lower the impact from where, what is the point, what is the baseline from where they started doing things. First of all, they started planning ahead of it. For example, in early 2000s, Europe started planning that what they have to achieve in next 50 years, next 60 years. Then they made small plans like 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 20-year plan, 25-year plan, etc. Their parliament, regional and local authorities and governments, they all became part of the game, and they all contributed at their own level. So they made policies at their own levels and then they implemented. So a single policy was same, the smaller version was adopted by the local governments. It included all the stakeholders, especially the people, and even more especially the underprivileged people. Integrated technology led energy efficient vehicles were used, and I have written a couple of papers on that as well, so you can check that how it is impacting the overall climate change. All the services were safe, accessible, and affordable. Transportation system was available to all. So they don't have to go on to their own vehicles every time, but they actually worked on the services rather than providing individual vehicles. They decoupled economic growth from the fuel sources. For example, they decoupled it from the coal, they decoupled it from the fossil fuels, but they went to see other sources. For example, hydraulic sources, wind energy, and above all, the solar panels, etc. Road safety was always kept as priority. So either they were adopting any service or they were adopting or designing any vehicle, road safety was the utmost priority. They reduced negative impacts of noise and the air pollution, and they shifted towards taking care of well-being and health of the people, of the common public. And then they also searched for multiple fuel resources and multiple fuel resource methods in which they can, even if they are utilizing the old-fashioned fuel resources, they developed those methods in which the minimum part or reliance on those sources was done. Direct and indirect transport factors that affected climate change. So, first of all, I would like to say about the environmental factors, and these are actually the indicators. Fossil fuel consumption is one of the factors that is impacting climate change. Carbon emissions, global warming, air quality degradation will tell you if air quality is degrading, it will tell you that the climate is going bad. Other greenhouse emissions, depletion of ozone layer, aerosol production, increased pollution, acid rains, toxic pollutants, and their levels. There are different standards, and each country owns their own index and standard to measure that. Atmospheric precipitation increase, uncertainty of weather conditions, and weathers are changing like they are changing their pattern frequently. Creation of volatile organic compounds, deforesting for making roads and track and channels, and this is happening in Pakistan as well. And if you see that lots of agricultural or forest land is now a built environment, smoke formation, etc. The social indicators are population growth. Increased population growth is definitely going to impact the climate because lots of consumptions of the resources is going to happen. Overconsumption of demand of any energy, increasing living standards of people, then they are going moving towards more buying more vehicles, more gadgets, more services, etc. Fast pace of urbanization and localized pace of urbanization. For example, if you consider the example of Lahore, it is urbanized like on a really faster pace, and there are many cities around Lahore that are not urbanizing on a faster pace. Even the people have started migrating from those areas to the Lahore in search of better facilities. So, if we create buffer zones and deploy this urbanization in a more smoother way, more homogeneous way, then it can also reduce the impact of climate change, or even, or maybe can reduce the localized impacts of climate change. Then tourism. In European countries, lots of tourism is happening, and lots of climate greenhouse gases or climatic impacts are due to tourism as well. The residents' attitude, like how we are using our resources in our own home, um, at what level we are consuming energy. Then modernity. Economic stage, what is the economic stage of our country? International factors and treaties that are impacting the measures that we have to take against climatic impact. GDP per population, emission from vehicle manufacturing industry, diffuse nature of biofuel industries, market power of oil companies, fuel infrastructures, etc. And whether we are looking for alternatives or not, energy securities, for example, petroleum imports, effective network coordination among fuel producers, vehicle manufacturer and fuel distributors, and the lack of fuel competition. So what preventive measures we can take in response to these? I told you about the environmental factors first. So those in response to those environmental factors, these are the preventive measures. We can ban fossil fuel vehicles altogether, and use of coolants in the vehicles because they're contributing a lot in the towards the greenhouse gases. Then improve the fuel quality, stopping pollution from manufacturing industries, making clouds in the atmosphere, adoption of fuel with reduced carbon content, use of biofuels, planting trees, meet Clean Air Act standards, eco driving, and stop using fossil fuels for energy generation in vehicles. Renewable and clean power. In social indicators, government should make programs that accommodate our social needs, and where socially we have to we are adding less towards the impact towards the impact in the climate. Voluntary agreement for transport efficiency, tax policies to promote nature-friendly fuels, and also tax policies to reduce use of private fossil fuel-based vehicles on the road, reduce population growth, which is very important but very neglected aspect. Effective measures and policies imposing high tax on fossil fuels. Public education campaigns should be there to educate common people. Then fiscal incentives based on the fact that if fiscal objectives are meet, if the yearly objectives of climate improvement are met, then the fiscal incentives will be provided. Then social marketing and mass transit systems, multimodal and public transport market share should be increased. Energy policies should be devised in such a way that should reduce the impact of energy greenhouse gases from the energy sector. And then the transport policies that should be designed in such a way that should lower the impact of carbon dioxide and other emissions in the air. Demographic policies for population and settlement policies should be there. Modernity can be addressed by advanced vehicles, hybrid electric vehicles, new and better infrastructure, that infrastructure which consumes lesser of ITS technologies, intelligent transport system technologies, because they are very good in monitoring and managing, and they also sense the impacts and keep the negative impacts in control. Carpooling is the service in which many people use a single car service to their origin and destination, and this way we can reduce number of cars on the road. Improving traffic equipment, we should use more monitored and improved efficient sensor-based traffic equipment. Promoting alternative fuels, for example electric vehicles. Improvement in the mobility management, so we have to mobilize people through different services rather than just by private vehicles. And we should also standardize our vehicle. For example, on the roads of Lahore, you're observing chinchis and all other substandard, actually no, non-standard, unstandard vehicles on the road. So they are contributing a lot and they are not monitored as they should be monitored. Technological improvements in the ecological efficiency of the vehicles. For example, now we have lithium-ion batteries, but there are certain concerns regarding the life cycle of electric vehicles. So we have to check for other more energy efficient and technologically improved batteries. Key indicators of climate change with respect to transportation are there are several um, indicators, and greenhouse emission gases are at the number one. And I have told you it's quite a bit of detail in the previous slides. Transportation is a major source of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide emissions, especially from road vehicles, aviation, and shipping industry. They're also adding it. Emission data is often used to monitor trends and set regulatory limits to curb the climate impacts. Then air quality degradation, emissions from transportation increase air pollutants, NOx, PM2, uh, 2.5, which affect local air quality and particulate matter. There are other types of particulate matter as well, and we have to keep that under control as well. But this one is really critical and contribute to global warming. Areas with high traffic typically show worsening air quality metrics over time. Rising urban temperatures, increased vehicular and industrial activities contribute to the urban heat island effect. Urban heat island effect is that effect in which particular areas are generating lots of emissions, lots of heat, and they are the biggest absorbent. And they are also impacting on the neighborhood as well. For example, you can call Lahore as a urban heat island. It is not only urban heat is staying here, but it is contributing to the rest of the or nearby or attached cities or towns as well. Cities with high traffic densities often experience temperatures several degrees warmer than surrounding areas, which correlates with the increased fuel consumption. Infrastructure damage from extreme weathers. More frequent and severe storms, floods, and wildfires are partly driven by climate change. These are causing greater wear and damage to the roads, bridges, railways, and monitoring repair cost and frequency reveal an upward trend tied to the changing climate patterns. Then increase fuel consumption. Higher global temperatures impact fuel efficiency due to cooling demands in the vehicles and fuel degradation. Trends in fuel consumption rates, especially in hotter regions, serve as indicators. Then shifts in transportation demand. Climate change prompts shifts towards sustainable options such as public transport, biking, electric vehicles. Monitoring these shifts provide insights into the climate adaptation efforts. Sea levels rise impacts on coastal infrastructure. Rising sea levels pose threats to the coastal infrastructure, transportation infrastructure. This includes ports, coastal roads, railways, increased spending on protective measures or relocations serves as an indicator of these impacts. Then investment in sustainable transportation system is another key indicator. Investment in electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and infrastructure like EV charging stations reflect both responses to climate change and shifts in the transportation sector towards reduced emissions. Monitoring these indicators help understand that how climate change affects transportation and vice versa, driving policies to mitigate and adapt to these impacts. So, as I just talked about electric vehicles, uh, one of my um, one of my talk from this the same forum that I gave like around a year and a half before, I covered the topic of electric vehicles. So just to make viewers, listeners a bit of more understanding on the topic, I have put this slide here again. So the conventional vehicles are totally relying on the fossil fuels, but compared to that, all electric vehicles, there are many types of electric vehicles as well. Some are hybrid and some are plug-in hybrid. The hybrid have still the biggest resource as fossil fuels, and small role is played by the batteries. Then plug-in hybrids still are relying on the fossil fuels, but major portion is covered by the batteries. But all electric vehicles have all the resources coming, all the energy coming from batteries. Now there is a myth, and breaking the myth based on the electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are not going to solve our problem of emissions until and unless we find the ways to recycle or to treat the battery and its components at later stage, because otherwise it is still going to impact the climate, right? And we also need to know that uh, electric vehicles and the background resources, if we are moving towards the background resources, for example, we have started generating electricity from hydropower. We have started generating, we are still using the same sources of fossil fuel in the background of energy generation. Then we are just shifting climate change from one point to another. So the point is that we have to stop using fossil fuels altogether, whether to charge the batteries, to provide energies to charge the batteries, to provide electricity. We have to move towards the sustainable transport, and we have to move towards the sustainable energy sources. For example, we have to move towards the wind energy, or we have to move towards the solar energy, where there are um, no emissions, no carbon dioxide generation, but where we also know that how we have to degenerate those solar plates, where we have to degenerate the batteries. So we have to check the whole cycle length of the system, not just one part. Now, trends. What have been the trends in the past a couple of years related to transportation and its emissions? So here I'm showing you the example of US again, that emissions have decreased by just over 3% in the in from 1990 to 2022, and these emissions fluctuate yearly due to economic changes. So how economics is impacting on the climate change? Better economy mean people have raised their living standards and they are moving towards buying more cars. More cars are coming into the system. Fuel prices and other factors, etc. By 2022, greenhouse gas emissions in US got raised by 0.2% compared to 2021 levels. So it is still increasing 0.2% per year. Impact of pandemic, and we all saw that during that pandemic duration, emissions were reduced all around the world. Emissions increased in 2021 and 2022 as economic activity rebounded, leading to a rise in carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel combustions. Carbon dioxide emissions from fossil and by 1% from 2021. Natural gas consumption generated approximately increased 5%, was increased 5% relative to 2021. So this increase was observed in all sectors except for US territories. Coal consumption and emissions from coal use decreased by 6% from 2021, mainly in the electric power sector. And in petroleum sector, consumption was increased by less than 1% in 2022. Climate change impact on transportation. Although the transportation system is built to withstand weather, climate change may still affect it over the time. Impacts vary by region, but disruptions in one area can impact other areas as well. For example, if bridge is damaged and if a road is damaged, it is going to impact the other areas as well. Examples of climate related impacts are coastal flooding. Over 60,000 miles of US roads and bridges in coastal areas risk flooding, and damage happen due to high rise sea levels. Nationwide effect is that changing water levels in one area is impacting shipping nationwide. Interdependencies with other sectors shows that transportation depends on sectors like water resources, water transport, energy sector, meaning climate impacts in these areas can also affect the transportation system. Measures to safeguard transportation and risk assessment shows that many communities are assessing climate threats to their transportation infrastructure. Engineering solutions are developing solutions to strengthen the system resilience. So what we engineers have to do, we have to, on one hand, we have to check and control the emissions, and on the other hand, we have to make our systems more resilient to these impacts. Climate data and planning. This climate data in planning, this is actually very important. Planners consider climate data in the design, construction, and maintenance of transportation projects. Now, you being engineers, you check how much you are considering the climate data when you are going for different projects. Government support should be there. Agencies provide funding and tools to support these resilience efforts. So these are the things that are happening in America. Now this is a standard to us, and now we have to check, um, being Pakistanis, that what we are doing. So in the context of Pakistan, growth rate of all sectors, and it accounts for about quarter of carbon dioxide emissions in Pakistan. Around 20% of emissions that are entering into our system are from transportation. Managing emissions in the transport sector is essential for addressing the climate change, and this task is challenging due to limited short-term options for technical improvements and the close link between transport volumes and economic growth. To address carbon emissions, Pakistan approved the National Electric Vehicle Policy that I have discussed in one of my lectures through this platform. And you can also check that policy in 2020. It came in 2019, 2020, that was setting the ambitious targets for electric vehicles. So we had to just to remind you guys that we should by 2025 we should have 30%, approximately 30% of electric vehicles on our roads, and we had supporting policies. For example, there were less or no tax on it at all. The National Electric Vehicle Policy aims for electric vehicles to make up to 30% of all passenger vehicles and heavy duty truck sale by 2030 and 90% by 2040. So these are our targets. And next year is 2025. So let's see where we are going. Emissions from the aviation sector are also concerning, as emissions released directly into the upper atmosphere are more harmful due to their longer residence time. Despite challenges, policy instruments are available to reduce emissions in both road and air transport. So we have to consider both of them. The government of Pakistan shall take the following policy measures. In road transport, government of Pakistan is sensitizing the public to the importance of proper vehicle maintenance for fuel efficiency, fuel efficiency enhancement and reduction of emissions. Ensure the provision of a full fuel efficient public transport system in the country. Government of Pakistan, particularly Ministry of Climate Change, set up and strictly enforce vehicle emission standards, promote the development and adoption of electric vehicles envisioned in Electric Vehicle Policy 2020 by providing incentives and by developing necessary infrastructure. Examine and implement actions that are required for the use of biofuel for local transport, plan and develop mass transit systems in the metropolitan system. This is still under process, and we can see Orange Line train in Lahore as a part of this, and bus rapid transit as a part of this scheme in Lahore. We can also observe that. Same is happening in Karachi transport as well, Peshawar public transport as well. Support the private transport sector by providing incentives for reducing emissions and environmentally friendly transport services. Promote the development and adoption of environmentally friendly transport technologies and efficient management techniques. This one actually caught me, and I wanted to share that. Promote greater use of compressed natural gas in the transport sector to the extent consistent with the availability of CNG in the market. So this should not be there, as my personal opinion, because we should not rely on natural gas anymore. We should rely on other sustainable modes. So this point is still in that document, and I think it should be revisited, and it shouldn't be there, because we should abandon any fossil fuel based source for our energy in any sector. Secure financing for technology innovations for urban planning and the transport sector, specifically to address the mitigation issues. Promote the development and installation of new pipelines for efficient transport for oil in the country. Improve walking pathways for pedestrians alongside roads with proper traffic signboards to encourage non-motorized modes of travel. Encourage non-motorized modes of travel such as bicycle and walking for shorter distances. And if we provide facilities, then we can even provide it for longer distances. But we have really extreme climates here, extreme weathers here. So it is difficult for people to use walking and bicycle. And I have paper on these as well. You can check that. There are also some of the barriers to use bicycle and walking, and social barrier is also one of the uh, major barrier, that why we are not walking, why we are not bicycling. More than 50% of our population is women, and until and unless they are feel they are to make feel safer, they won't go for this option. Until and unless our weather gets better and we provide lots of shades on the footpaths and lots of plantation along the way, we cannot use bicycle and walking. And there were other determinants as well that you can check in that paper. So these are the aspects that we should work on one by one, and to make it align with the government, uh, so that if these are implemented, then we can definitely make a big change in our climatic goals. Aviation, in the sector of aviation, encourage the national airline to give due consideration to new fuel efficient aircrafts, causing minimum carbon emissions while planning fleet upgradation. Support the International Civil Aviation Organization's initiative for carbon emission reduction through improved air traffic management, which includes improved weather services and free flight air routes instead of defined routes that hold the potential for reduced flight time and thus fuel consumption. Participate actively in international civil aviation organizations' activities and initiatives, and ensure that the new strategies and policies of ICAO do not hurt the economic interest of developing countries' aviation industries. So we have lots of things to balance in between. We have society, we have limited technological resources, we have limited skilled resources. So lots of things that we have to play as an engineer in between. Railway, ensure the provision of an efficient railway system in the country, upgrade and expand the railway network in the country, as the advantages of railway over road travel in terms of carbon emissions are well recognized. Inland waterways transport, develop and promote inland waterway transportations. So these are the government's initiatives that that is suggested to us and suggested to the local governments to take action. But what we can do as a nation and as a layman approach, if we have to tell a layman what we have to do, we actually have to build resilience among us as a nation, resilience among politicians, resilience among our infrastructure. Support smart transportation options. There are many transportation options that we can opt, but that needs initial funds. For example, we have to move towards sustainable transportation modes that are walking, cycling, and public transportation options. But we should have a very dense public transportation network all around the city that should be connected and well accessible, so that people can use it rather than using their own vehicles. We have to report damages to the authorities. We have to get to know our neighbors and create a better bond, social bond, so we can deal with the social challenges. We have to reduce carbon footprint, and carbon footprint mean that we have to reduce carbon dioxide in our system. Plan ahead of business disruptions. So we have to plan our trips, we have to plan our budget, we have to plan everything in advance, and we have to also check that before jumping into our plan, where it is leading to us. There are many paths to climate action, each bringing us closer to protecting our environment. Our efforts must be guided by scientific understanding and the voice of those most affected by the climate crisis. As we face escalating climate challenges, let's stay committed and flexible, shaping our actions and advocacy towards a shared vision of more resilient planet. So this is what we can do as individuals. 8 climate action strategies for a resilient planet are: help protect pollinators. Uh, by pollinators, you might have heard about pollinations. So, like small birds and insects, particularly honeybee, we call them the best pollinators, so that our plantation should sustain. Adopt more sustainable travel practices. We have just talked about it. Support climate research. There is less research that is happening on the climate, and from this presentation, one of the main aim, as I described in the very beginning, that I'm covering the breadth of this topic, that you should see that how many dots we have to connect. There is lots to connect, and if we are just focusing on one bit, it is not giving us a benefit, giving us an advantage over the other aspects. So we have to create a bigger network of climate research, organize our bioblitz, support systematic and legislative solutions, follow youth activists, involve youth in it, and climate leaders to deliver our objectives more efficiently. Support healthy air initiatives, make your home more sustainable. So what Paris did, Paris Agreement is like a book to us, encyclopedia or a baseline to us, that gives us different guidelines that we all have to follow. And 196 countries are actually part of this United Nations Climate Paris Agreement, which was developed in December 2015. Its main aim is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, with efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius and no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius in any case. It is based on the understanding that limiting warming to these levels will significantly reduce the risks and impacts of climate change. Key elements are that global temperatures should sustain in limits. Nationally determined contributors, like each country, they have to submit their own climate action plan. Because as I told you, climate is different for each country. The triggering determinants and the variables are different, indicators are different. So each country have to make their own national determined contribution, which outlines targets for reducing greenhouse gases emissions and adapting climate impact. But we have a one goal line, that is the sustainable development goals that I have shown you in the very beginning. The NDCs are to be updated every 5 years. We have to reflect for the greater ambition, and we have to check where we have to change our plan if our goals are not aligned, not meeting. Adaptation encourages countries to strengthen their ability to deal with the impacts of climate change by building resilience and reducing vulnerability. Climate reversal is not a thing anymore. So what we can do, we can reduce the adding impact into the climate. But for that, we have to change with the passage of time as well. We cannot stay on one point and we wait that the climate will reverse and it will come to us. No, but we have to make our systems, buildings, our transport system, our energy sector more resilient and less vulnerable. Developed countries are expected to provide financial support to developing countries to help them reduce emissions and adapt to climate impacts, with a global mobilizing of 100 billion per year, $100 billion per year by 2020, extended to 2025. Then transparency and accountability is the utmost important thing, but yet it is the yet most neglected thing. Countries are required to report on their emissions with international reviewers to ensure transparency. Global stocktake: every 5 years, a global review will assess collective progress towards the goals of the agreement, helping to inform subsequent rounds of NDCs. Recognize the needs to address loss and damages that are associated with the climate impacts, though it stops short of requiring compensation or liability. So this Paris Agreement is legally binding in its procedural elements, but the actual emission reduction targets are voluntarily, like each country have to control on their own. This framework encourages countries to be more ambitious over time to meet global climate goals collaboratively. Now, in the last, as being engineers, we should know that how we are going to evaluate the damage. So
हाँ वो
just
उसको मैं देखती थी
some
जरा जरा उसके साथ में ऊपर सालन की तरह डाल के लगा हुआ उन्होंने। तो मैं वही देख रही हूँ मैं
uh,
कि इन लोगों ने इसके सामने क्यों रखी नहीं है ऐसा कोई
evaluation
हो ना
of damages
एक साइड पे जो उसका
caused
सामान है ना
by
जैसे उसको
transportation.
चावल
Hmm.
दाल एक साइड पे बना बीच में ऐसे
Evaluating
जहाँ
the
पे
Please,
चीज
damages
डालने की जगह
please,
है
caused by climate
एक
just a
change.
साइड पे
second.
हमारा एम्प्लॉय है दफ्तर
Evaluating the
Kindly mute
damages
your.
caused by climate change due to transportation requires assessing both direct and indirect impacts. So these evaluations generally encompass financial, environmental, health, infrastructure aspects. And here is the structured approach. So being engineers, if someone asks you to estimate, to evaluate that what are the damages of climate change, so you should know that you have to check the greenhouse emission analysis, and for that, you can estimate emissions directly caused by transportation. So here I'm giving example of transportation. You can also check the same way from industry and other different industries, etc. Calculate the social cost of carbon, representing the financial impact of each ton of carbon dioxide on society. Data sources should be, you can use emission data from government agencies, environmental reports, and carbon footprint calculators. Then you can multiply emissions by a standardized cost per ton of carbon dioxide to estimate damage cost, then factor in the cumulative long-term impact in climate change. Then you can also check health impact assessment. You can calculate the health cost resulting from air pollution due to transportation emissions. So it is not just limited to asthma or cardiovascular, but skin diseases as well, and cancer diseases as well, and link them to climate related exacerbation. Then the data source could be public health studies, hospital admissions, mortality rates that is linked to air pollution, and local air quality monitoring. You can evaluate it by assessing the direct healthcare cost, lost productivity, and premature mortality associated with transportation related air pollutants and climate change induced effects. Then you can also check infrastructure damage and maintenance cost. Its scope could be, you can evaluate increased infrastructure damage due to extreme weather, flooding, earthquake, heat wave, landslide, etc., fires, etc., that impacts roads, bridges, railways, and ports. Then historical data you can obtain from historical maintenance records, cost of repairs due to extreme weather events, and adaptation expenditures. The remedial measures that you have taken, you can also add them as well. Evaluate it by comparing the cost of frequent repairs over time to determine how much of the increase correlates with the climate induced extreme weather events. Then you can check the economic impacts. It is actually very important, but it is less utilized. Measure the lost revenue and increased operational cost from climate disruptions, flight cancellations, shipping delays, etc. Data sources include business reports, insurance claims, operational disruptions due to weather. You can evaluate by quantifying the revenue losses and additional costs like rerouting, repair of damaged assets, and increased insurance premiums to find climate related economic impacts. Then the ecosystem and biodiversity cost. You can assess environmental damage such as habitat destruction, ocean acidification, oil spills, acidic rains, etc., that result from transportation system contributing to climate change. And the data should be from the environmental impact assessments, biodiversity studies, and ecosystem health reports. You can evaluate it by use cost benefit analysis for restoration and conservation efforts, as well as estimated economic value of ecosystems and services lost due to the transportation activities. Then shift in the land use and resource consumption. It is also one of the important major damages from land use changes such as deforestations, for road expansion and increased resource extraction for fuel, metal, and materials. Data sources are land use records, deforestation data, resource extraction rates, etc. And you can evaluate, quantify the ecosystem services lost due to land use and account for both ecological impacts and the increase in carbon footprint from resource extractions. Adaptation and mitigation cost. It is also one of the important, and we are not working on it right now. Evaluate the expenses incurred to adapt or mitigate transportation's climate impacts, such as building EV infrastructure, flood defenses, and implementing sustainable fuel alternatives. The data could be arranged from government reports, business investment in adaptation, and climate policy expenditures. You can sum the investment cost in sustainable transportation solutions and compare these to the projected benefits considering climate resilience and emissions reductions. Indirect social and economic costs examine the impacts such as urban heat islands from vehicular emissions, reduced quality of life in areas with high air pollution, economic losses in tourism. And the data source could be quality of life indices, property value reports, and tourism data. And you can evaluate, assess that how climate related transportation affects influence property values, tourism revenue, and urban livability. Then in the last, analytical tools and models, we have to work on cost benefit analysis, weights in economic benefits for transportation against climate damage cost. Climate impact models are required to be used and developed further. Models like integrated assessment model can project the impact of emissions on climate and calculate associated social cost. GIS could be used to evaluate the spatial impacts like infrastructure, vulnerability to sea level rise, and extreme weather conditions. So, evaluating these damages comprehensively enable policymakers, you engineers, to address and mitigate the transportation sector's impact on climate change and prepare for future resilience. Now, here I would like to conclude and I would like to tell you what is the way forward. First, I would definitely like to tell you the way forward. Actually, we need to analyze it further. We need to acquire more data. We need to record more data, and we need to do comparative analysis, cost benefit, and behavioral studies. Technological advancement should be there, but we need to keep record and we need to follow it up. Complex interplay of variables and different stakeholders is required. So as you can see that the climate is big, transportation is very big, climate and transportation are ever bigger. So we need to collaborate not only at individual level, but at every possible level. So we need to play in this complex dynamics. Research and development. We need investment. We need research funds. And this initiative should be like from the private sector and from the government sector. Top-down policy approach is required for the implementation and bottom-up approach for the collective impact. We have a national transportation plan in Pakistan, and I have gone through it, and it doesn't say much. So we need to develop a comprehensive transportation national plan that should lead us to a comprehensive climate action plan, right? So every contribution matters, your contribution matters, my contribution matters. So we have to start working on it at our individual level. Join heads and take all stakeholders on board. And we need to have regular talks, regular forums, regular discussions. And those discussions should not be personalized, but it should be in the bigger interest of our future generations. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions.
Nabil Saab, I hope your first two questions have been answered, but still, if you have any supplementary, you can ask. Anyhow, Nabil Saab has a third question also, Dr. Anwar, and he has asked, How do satellite data and remote sensing technologies aid in defining and tracking climate change?
Sorry, couldn't hear you.
Nabil has asked his third question, which is how do satellite data and remote sensing technologies aid in defining and tracking climate change?
Mhm. Uh, I don't understand because it's stuck. Did you ask that
Basically, the
how
question is,
satellite data can be used in recognizing the climate impact? Did I hear?
yes, yes, exactly. I mean, I think Nabil Saab is asking how satellite data can be used in uh, making climate change effective. Dr. Saiba, can you hear me? It looks like your cam has frozen. Your picture is frozen.
Please repeat it. I didn't hear the question.
Nabil is asking how do satellite data and remote sensing technologies aid in defining and tracking climate change?
Oh, it is actually used in so many ways. First, it makes the heat maps. We can check it with the climate change, the patterns of the winds, the clouds. We can also check the damages on the ground. We can also check the drought, and we can compare it with the historical data captured by the images. So if we acquire that kind of data, that is really good because it is giving you full scale picture, temporal picture, spatial data, and you can compare it over many years. So then you can also check the patterns in small windows of time as well. So you can also have like real time data. That it is very it would be great if someone have that kind of data, and it can be used in many ways. For example, you can extract that data, you can use it in GIS, you can use that data in creating predictive models, and you can check that how the impact of climate change per year, per month, you can quantify it in so many ways.
Thank you, Dr. Saiba. Today I think the lecture was a bit long, so we have no time left for question and answer session. The lecture was very interesting, so I did not intervene to cut short the lecture. So anyhow, if you have still any questions, you can email your questions to Mrs. Sadia Naveed on the address given in our website, and she will forward all the questions to Dr. Anwar, and I'm pretty sure he would be very pleased to answer them.
I will definitely respond.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I do not have even a little time for further questions. So please email your questions to psce@org, psce@psce.org.pk. And further, Dr. Saab, thank you very much for shedding detailed information on this climate change caused by transportation. Your lecture was very informative and very detailed. I hope this session has provided the audience with practical takeaways and inspiration for applying new ideas to your own work also. And before I close the session, there are routine routine announcements. Next lecture would be on 16th November 2024, and the topic is civil design of overhead electrical transmission lines. I just remind, this is a very interesting topic. This is for the civil engineers who would like to work in the transmission line and grid station sector. So our speaker will be Mohammad Jahanare. He's an Iranian national, and he would be speaking directly from Tehran. So it is on 16th November 2024. Topic, I repeat, civil design of overhead electrical transmission lines. And our speaker is Mohammad Jahanare. Dr. Saab, your shield and your certificates will be sent directly to your address. Either it will be dropped by some person of PSCE, or it will be sent by the courier mail.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen who have participated in this lecture, for the CPT points, they can collect their certificates on from 31st October, which is Thursday, from 14A1 Block B, Model Town Extension, Lahore. And before coming, if you want to confirm whether your certificate is ready or not, you can call Ahmad Akram. His telephone number is 0347 462 5111 5111. I repeat, 0347 462 5111. Now, thank you very much, and I would like to see you again on 16th November 2024. And Mia Saab, thank you very much. You are a very encouraging inspiration for us. I look forward to see you again. Dr. Saiba, thank you very much. Audience,
very
Allah
much.
bless you all. Thank you very much.